Welcome, my name is KingK. Today, Metroid. Again. As I mentioned in my Metroid Prime review, I've been on a huge Metroid binge lately. I played through Fusion, then Zero Mission, then Super Metroid, then the Prime Trilogy, then Other M, although that one's still pending completion, let's just say. Point is, I blasted through the entire main line in a few months. Obviously, this series does me something goddamn special. I'm in a very interesting position as a newcomer to the series. Over the years, I have passively watched the Metroid fanbase bubble into a boiling pot of impatience as they wait in agony for a new, proper Metroid game. I could only sympathize with them since I had no clue what it must have been like. It was painful to watch everyone die on the inside when Metroid Prime Federation Force was announced after 5 years of waiting, and coming off, at best, a mediocre installment. The last Metroid game the fans universally accepted as good was Prime 3 back in 2007. If we're strictly talking 2D action, it was Zero Mission in 2004. At least 9 years without a good Metroid game, and it's incredibly easy to understand why the fans have been so frustrated with recent Metroid-related news. A petition to shut the game down might have been immature, but at least I can understand the sentiment behind it. Federation Force was released to predictably divisive reviews, some as high as an 8 out of 10 and some as low as a 4.5 out of 10. On Metacritic, it's currently sitting at 71 out of 100. I don't take much stock in arbitrary ranking systems, hence why I don't use one, but this should give you an idea as to how controversial this new release is. Since most popular traditional media outlets are harboring the lower scores, this game is probably going to get swept under the rug and sell miserably. Doesn't help that it's a first-person shooter on the 3DS, which requires a niche market that can tolerate a control scheme like that. I haven't played it, and I don't plan to, because the trailers haven't impressed me, and I'd rather save my money for another game down the road. Reviewers and friends I trust have informed me the game is pretty good on its own merits, but from what I've read, I don't think I'd enjoy it enough to immediately justify spending $40 on it. Happy 30th birthday, Samus, I guess? In an ironic twist of fate, the best thing to happen to Metroid wasn't even produced by Nintendo. A fan remake of Metroid 2 was released on August 6th, Metroid's birthday, and to say it was what every Metroid fan wanted would be an understatement. I haven't been amidst the Metroid drought until relatively recently, and even I could taste the refreshment of seeing a title screen logo for a new Metroid game, however fan-made it might be. Of course, Nintendo had to DMCA it, blah blah, protecting their IP, blah blah, disrespecting Metroid, blah blah. I don't really want to get involved with that shit show. I don't have the experience to dabble in legal matters, so I'm just going to respectfully disagree with Nintendo's attitude. What I'm more interested in talking about is the future of Metroid in regards to the formula. I happen to believe that AM2R, or another Metroid 2 remake, lays the perfect groundwork for a modern Metroid installment. I want this video to be a list of great design choices Nintendo needs to consider if they ever decide to finally make another Metroid proper. There are a ton of brilliant, seamlessly woven ideas in AM2R that need to make their way into the minds of whoever produces the next Metroid. The first of which has to be the options menu. I know console games aren't known for their options, but in the case of a new Metroid, none of it has to be related to graphics. Sure, it will be nice to set a resolution, mess with VSync and AA, or even turn off motion blur, but welcome to console gaming, I guess. That's not really what I'm getting after when I say I want a strong options menu. I'm specifically referring to the controls, and how AM2R crafts a brilliant compromise between the control of Metroid Zero Mission and Super Metroid. You can change the morph ball controls, the controls for missile switching, and you can remap your keys to anything you might prefer. When I jumped into SR388 for the first time, I naturally had to mess around in the options menu to get exactly what I wanted. It took a minute or two of troubleshooting, but once I had it down, I never had to touch the menu again. The controls are perfectly fine for anyone to pick up and play without messing around, but the option is still there for more experienced Metroid players who know exactly what control scheme works for them. This is a surefire way to ensure everyone can comfortably control your game, and is something not out of left field for Nintendo. Their Virtual Console system on the Wii U allows you to remap the controls to any button on the gamepad or Pro Controller. There is absolutely no reason to have customizable keys in the Virtual Console but not have them in your new Metroid, hell, in any of your new games. Look, you you don't have to go overboard with your options menu, which is why I've started with something small that I know you're capable of doing. Customizable keys and a few options for morphball activation and missile selection. This is all I ask in terms of options, and I'll be completely satisfied. Up next, we have AM2R's brilliant representation of both 2D and 3D Metroid. I'm sure most fans can agree that Metroid is at its best in 2D, a la Super and Zero Mission. Fast-paced action-adventure platforming. That isn't the only draw of Metroid, though. For me, the atmosphere is exquisite. It's easy to put yourself in Samus's boots, since she's all alone on a hostile alien planet trying to get her bearings just as much as you are. The music tends to fit the mood, bombastic when it needs to be, spooky when the situation calls for it, and downright beautiful sometimes. The color palette is indeed vibrant, but the lighting was a bit more dim to remind you that you're several hundred meters underground, surrounded by hostile aliens. Metroid Prime gracefully transitioned this aspect and manages to blend story and world building into the mix. All of a sudden, you're scanning lore to figure out what happened to the Chozo and uncovering the mystery the space pirates are in the process of unveiling. The scan visor is single-handedly one of the best things to happen to Metroid in terms of world building, at the cost of an admittedly slower pace. The beauty, as I mentioned in my review, is that you don't need to link story and world building with the Metroid formula. You have the option to scan or not to scan. AM2R perfects this immersive hybrid formula. Whenever something of note happens, it's recorded in Samus's logbook, which can be checked at any time. If, say, an earthquake occurs, you'll be able to read up on it in your logbook. Similarly, when you've encountered a new boss, you can open your logbook to learn more about it and potentially discern some of its weaknesses. The beauty still being that it's completely optional and made even easier to consume since the game does the scanning for you. It combines the fast-paced 2D Metroid action with the slower-paced world building of the Prime games, and it does so blissfully. Scanning has become an integral part of the Metroid formula for me, and practically binds Metroid together at its immersively fun core. If Nintendo greenlights a new Metroid game, they better bring the scan logs back. Yet, the scan logs wouldn't be interesting if we didn't have any new places to explore, which leads me to my next point. Keep it original. One thing that's been constantly nagging at me ever since they released the trailer for Sonic Mania was the inclusion of Green Hill Zone under the moniker of reimagined classic. I cannot tell you how sick I am of classic nostalgia pandering in modern Sonic games. It's running rampant, and it's beginning to stifle the thematic creativity of Sonic Team. I don't want Metroid to fall into this same trap. It's done a pretty great job at avoiding it so far, excluding the remakes for obvious reasons. Metroid Prime has been the only game in the series that heavily borrows from something like Super Metroid. Other games in the series have similar theming, but none of them directly rip off any of the previous games. Some even blend the themes with other interesting concepts, like the lava area in Metroid Prime 3 being the Space Pirates Industrial Complex. AM2R had some amazing ideas, including a waterworks and an energy core, all used in scan logs to justify how the Chozo civilization on SR388 functioned and maintained its ecosystem. Not only is it narratively sound, but it's able to use an area that would usually be a Meridia clone and turn it into a system of pipes instead, adding a completely reasonable and unique method of traveling throughout SR388. What I want more than anything is for Nintendo to make a new world and enrich it. Write original lore instead of relying on the Chozo and Space Pirates all the time. I love them, but they aren't the only beings in the universe. I thought the Luminoth, Ing, and Phazon were great inclusions, and would love to see a new race of people or monsters in a new game. One of my favorite parts of AM2R is when you stumble upon the remains of the Federation's troops sent to rescue the investigation team. It really sets up the evolved Metroids as a force to be reckoned with, and furthers your resolve to exterminate them for the betterment of humankind. Granted, while this was drafted up in the manual of the original game, Dr. M64 went through the trouble of including it as a side objective in the actual game, and it has a positive effect on my impression of SR388 and the Metroids as a species. While I'd prefer something a bit more complex, like the war that erupted on Ether between the Luminoth and Ing, if it's simply a story about a new breed of dangerous monsters, provided they're set up correctly, it could do wonders for the Metroid universe. Hell, if it were just a freak of nature like the SAX, I'd be okay with it. One last convenience I couldn't seem to fit into any other category is the pop-up text for a new power-up. Dr. M64 had the foresight to allow you to skip the text that appears when you pick up a new power-up. The game doesn't even stop you when you pick up a second missile tank, because it's assuming you're an intelligent human being and know what a missile tank is, because the game just introduced it to you. On the other hand, if you've played the game before, you can skip the text for the various suit because you know what it is and what it does. Now you don't need to sit through the power-up jingle, even if I do enjoy it. Finally, listen to your fanbase, Nintendo. The Metroid fanbase isn't nearly as splintered as something like the Sonic fanbase, which only wishes it could have a majority opinion. The consensus with most Metroid fans is that they want a new game that embodies the fast-paced, immersive action it's known for. There's a reason fans didn't like the overhanded and downright offensive storytelling in Other M, and there's a reason some fans have been extremely disappointed by the release of Federation Force. There is most certainly a reason everyone is playing AM2R, and that's because Dr. M64 gets it. He's clearly a fan of the series, or at least understood it on such a fundamental level that he was able to craft a perfect framework for a new Metroid game, be it 2D or 3D. I'd prefer 2D, but if we got a Prime 4, as long as it adheres to my wish list, I'm sure it'll turn out fantastic. Just have faith in us, Nintendo. The reason we aren't buying Federation Force is because it's a co-op shooter on the 3DS. It's not Metroid, and you can't fool us into thinking it is. If it doesn't succeed financially, it isn't because we don't support Metroid, it's because we want a proper Metroid game out of you guys. If a small team of fans can cobble together one of the best Metroid games in years, what's to say you can't make an even better game with all of the design marriages set in stone by Dr. M64? Even better, why don't you give Dr. M64 a job? Christian Whitehead is working with Sega to make a new 2D Sonic game, so why can't Dr. M64 work to make a new 2D Metroid, assuming he even wants a job there in the first place? Whatever the case, whether Nintendo decides to release a Metroid game or not, whether they decide to adopt the brilliant design choices of AM2R, it doesn't keep me up at night. I know I have a host of fantastic Metroid games to start replaying and learning everything about. There are lots of secrets I still need to uncover and lots of fun to still be had. I just hope those who've drained Metroid of all of its juices can find solace in the release of AM2R until Nintendo gets its head out of its ass. My name has been KingK, and I certainly hope you have some well-deserved fun today.